And we are live. Hi everyone, I'm Roberta, I'm TranslaStars content manager, and I'm here today with Diego Perez, okay, the other way, English into Brazilian Portuguese video game translator. So hi Diego, how are you?
Hello, Roberta. I'm doing great. How about you? Hello,
I'm
everyone.
I'm very well. So we're here today to give some advice on how to enter the video game localization world. But before we start, please remember to drop your questions in the chat if you want to ask Diego anything. And also, please remind that this interview will be recorded so you can also catch up on it later. So, are you ready, Diego?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so let's get started. So my first question is, you graduated exactly 10 years ago because I did my homework and I stalked you on LinkedIn. So did you know then that you wanted to become a video game translator?
I did not actually. I enrolled in the Portuguese and English language and literature university because I wanted to be a video game writer and narrative designer.
Wow.
At that time, that sounded like an obvious choice to me because I was really passionate about video games since a very young age, and I was also passionate about writing. I wrote fan fictions and all kinds of things and some nonsense too, including some song lyrics and things like that. But once I graduated, I could not find a related job there, especially here in Brazil. The game development market was still in the first steps, so I could not find a job with what I wanted. And in that time, I even considered finding something that was not language related, and anything I could find a job in, because I was very young. But then I had a very my university had a very comprehensive curriculum, and I had studied translation at the time. And one of my connections in the university actually went on to become a translator. So during that time, I talked to him, and he helped me land my first job as a freelancer. But during that time, that was not video game related. Actually, it was a very a hard job to do because I had to translate around 5,000 words a day, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And it was some technical fields that I was not familiar with. So I translated machine manuals, oil and gas procedures, medical leaflets, agreements, anything they could throw my way. I was just there, so it was a hard time for me. But also, it was very important because I was able to improve my research skills a lot, and and I felt capable, like that I could that I could tackle anything and anything and any kind of subject that I was asked to translate. I felt like I was capable of doing that. And it was also very important because I found out that translation was something I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the challenge of having a source text and figuring out how that text should be translated to my native language. And it actually took me almost 1 year, maybe a bit more, to finally realize that I could employ those skills for video game translation. And that's when it really clicked for me that I could have my greatest passion, that's video games, and join it with my best skill at the time, which was translation.
The perfect marriage.
Yeah, that's it.
And then later, how did you get your first video game translator assignment?
Well, when I was translating technical things, I thought that video game localization was made in house. I thought that game developers had their own teams, and the only way to land those jobs was to moving abroad, living abroad, right? Because remote work was not a reality at the time. It really advanced, especially after the pandemic. So I never thought I could localize video games from the comfort of my home. I think that I was not even aware of the word localization, to be perfectly honest. So when I finally realized that localization could be done in a freelancer capacity instead of just in-house, that's when I started frantically looking for translation agencies, and I was actually amazed when I found out that that there were a lot of localization agencies, just as many, not just as many, but almost as many as regular translation agencies. So I applied to a dozen of them, maybe a bit more, and I finally got back with the translation test. Thankfully, I passed, and yeah, and it all worked out for me after this. And I remember that first my first feelings when I was localizing video games for the first time, I was amazed to think that something I wrote, something that I actually wrote, would be on the screen of thousands of Brazilian players that could get to experience the favorite games in their native language. So this is what has always kept me going forward in this industry.
So right now you are a game localization wizard, but what has changed for you and for the industry in the last 10 years?
Well, the industry has grown a lot bigger than 10 years ago. Digital distribution has become the norm since then. And for to give some perspective, 10 years ago, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One hadn't even launched yet. And PlayStation 5 is now almost 3 years old. So it has, just to give some perspective, how much time that has been. And the mobile market, the mobile game market at the time was on its first steps. And ever since then, game development in general has become much more accessible. And it also has decentralized from North America and Europe. So you have a lot of game studios spread all over the world, in the East and everywhere. And ever since then, the player base has increased, and players are willing to spend more, especially with microtransactions like buying cosmetics or DLCs and things like that. And I think the localization industry as a whole has also grown bigger together with this market. So today, if you go to Steam, for example, on PC, you'll see that most games that you look at the store will have at least a dozen languages they are available in. So game developers have quickly come to realize the how good it is to localize their games, and how important localization is to increase their reach into other markets. So I think this has really changed because there are many more translation localization agencies right now than when I started. So you have small agencies providing premium services to game developers, and I think it's a nice time for game localization in general.
Mhm. So Gustavo writes, I'm looking forward for the workshop with Diego this month. So spoiler alert, Diego will give more advice during his expert course in video game localization, and I will drop the link in the chat. Um, so you could consider signing up. It starts on May 15. And so please, if you have any questions related to this live session or to the course, please just write them in the chat. And I will go forward with my next question, which is a bit tricky, so be prepared. So in hindsight, what's the most terrible mistake you made as a new translator?
Well, in hindsight, to be perfectly honest, I think it was neglecting my career. Because once I started working on the localization of big game titles, like, I don't know, StarCraft Remastered and Watch Dogs and games like that, it all felt like a dream come true. And also, I come from a developing country, and I was working for foreign companies. So my monthly income at the time was just superior to everyone my age. So and then, as a young man, at the wise age of 25 years old, I was led to believe I had reached the peak of my career, that it just couldn't get any better than that, and I was really happy at the time. So I enjoyed working with the people I was working with, but I failed to realize that it was just the beginning, right? That language skills are just a part of a freelance translator has to work on in their career. So through the next years in game localization, I continually improved my language skills. I thought I got even better at my job, but I did not consider what other skills I had to develop to keep my career moving forward. So in hindsight, I think I would be more mindful of that when I was younger.
So you said building your career, not only skills wise, so also on the marketing side of freelancing. So getting more clients, not relying on the good old ones that you have, something like that.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And that's a common mistake actually. A lot of colleagues I know and people I see on LinkedIn, they have come forward to tell a similar story that they had one client or two clients and that they stayed with for a long time, and they then they forgot to really market themselves and see freelance translation as more of a business than just something that you have to work on the language skills only.
Mhm. So that said, what essential skills does a video game translator need to have or build over time?
Well, language skills are naturally the first choice because a localization specialist needs to understand what the standard language and terminology are for different game genres and game audiences and be able to adjust their writing accordingly. Right, so this is really important. You can't be a good translator without working on your language skills. And video game localization can be really challenging because a single game has different kinds of formality or kinds of text because you are translating instructions and then you are translating dialogue lines which are more casual, colloquial, informal. So you really have to be tuned for all these different aspects of writing, and you have to be able to apply that in your own writing. And coming right up next to right up after language skills, I would say research skills, because video game translation is usually seen as one single specialization, but the truth is that games can vary a lot between one another. So on one day, for example, you might be localizing a hunting simulator. So you will translate a lot of animal names, plant names, weapon parts, and survival things in general. And on the next week, you might get assigned for a racing game, for example. And then you'll need to know some technical terminology related to mechanical parts, for example. So you need to be comfortable with surfing the internet and navigating game documentation with dozens or hundreds of pages. So, and of course, as a translator, you can be honest with your project manager and say, okay, I'm not familiar with this topic. I'd rather get assigned to another game job, but still you'll need good research skills, even if you are working within your specialization, right? And finally, communication negotiation skills are essential for a translator to advance the career, like I mentioned in the previous questions. That's what will keep assignments coming your way, right? From different sources to diversify your income. And that's how you will be able to increase your rates according to your experience and certifications. So, in a nutshell, to do a good job, you need language skills and research skills. And to have a great career, you need communication and negotiation skills.
Mhm. So Gustavo writes, Diego, Elden Ring must have been quite a challenge to translate. Could you give us more context around it?
Well, I actually did not work on Elden Ring. It's a great game that was released, I think, last year or 2 years ago, but I was not involved in the translation. So
Mhm.
I can't really speak to it, but I know the game. I've watched the videos, and I agree it must have been quite a challenge to translate.
So to follow up on that, what has been the most challenging project that you've worked on, or the one that you feel most proud of?
Well, I because of NDAs, I can't really go much
Okay.
delve too deep into that. But from the ones I can mention, that is the one that I was credited in. I think it was probably Watch Dogs Legion because they had because the characters they have different personas, so it was not a single character with one personality. So for example, if you had one dialogue line, and this dialogue line could be said by the same dialogue line could be spoken by different characters with different persona. So and that of course the kind of discourse was adapted to it, and there were a lot of technical spec- technical things in the game that were really challenging, but I cannot go much further than that. But it definitely was one of
But
the
you
biggest challenges.
survived. You
Yeah, it's
survived.
survived. Yeah, it's survived. Yeah, actually, and now I'm working. I'm also working on the localization of Kenshi 2 by Lo-Fi Studios, and that's also a very challenging project. I don't know when it's going to be released, but the kind of discourse involved in the dialogue lines, they can really vary. They have a lot of nuances. It's a British game, so the humor has is different from Portuguese, and so to translate it effectively and in a natural way, I'm just really pushing my limits and finding and really getting in tune with a casual language in Brazil to make it sound natural, funny, and still within the tone that was established for Kenshi too.
Mhm. So when you say language skills, how do you improve them? By reading, by listening to, I don't know, TV? What's your trick for improving language skills?
Yes, that's something that I'm always telling students and people I mentor, that you have to be in tune with your native language. People naturally they tend to consume a lot of the source language. So, for example, in my case, that would be English. They tend to consume that a lot. But if you are too distant from your native language, chances are your translation will have a similar structure to the source language. So it maybe the translation will be grammatically correct, probably will, if you're doing a good job, but it not be as natural as native speakers in your language are communicating. So you have to really consume a lot of content in your native language, and you have to be always especially aware of how the communication is taking place, depending on the social context of the characters, of their education levels, or the medium that's going on there. So that's really how you can start working towards a more natural translation or localization in your language.
Mhm. So we have three questions from the audience. The first one is from Alice. Hi, Diego. I'm not sure if you have already mentioned it, but in the market of game localization, is it possible to work as a freelancer, or can you also be officially hired by a game localization company? So you spoke a little bit about this before, but maybe you can expand on that.
Of course, yes, you definitely can land a full-time job in a game localization agency or in a game developer, especially with remote work being so widespread right now. There are a lot of job opportunities there. So you can even use LinkedIn to find those opportunities. You can set your preferences to remote locations, and you will see a lot of game localization jobs. However, if you are starting out, it will probably be hard to land those kind of jobs, because the freelance market in game localization is just so big that even when people apply to those full-time positions, the ones that get selected are usually from the freelance market. They already have some experience with game localization, so companies they tend to prefer those kind of applications. But you definitely can land those jobs. There are very good jobs in game localization that you can get hired to do.
Mhm. So we have another question from Rafael. Can a beginner translator get into translation market easily without recommendation? What would be the starting point?
Well, the starting points, you will have to build a good online profile. You probably might want to consider building a website with a portfolio, and then you would go on to do some sample translation. So you can start looking for example, store pages, or just uh, play games that you think will have a challenging localization, and then you can translate things that you find interesting as a portfolio, and you can make that available. So I think that just like any other career, it's hard to really get inside the industry when you have no experience, no recommendation, or no education. But if you have a polished profile, for example, on LinkedIn, and you have the connections and you have a portfolio, it will be a bit easier to land those jobs. And the good news is that the game localization market, especially freelance one, there it's really big, and translators are always moving from one agency to another. So there are a lot of openings. There's always some kind of opening, because if a translator is not available, then the agency will have to find another one. And that happens a lot on the freelance market. So if you are well positioned, if you are sending applications, eventually chances are some of those agencies will eventually reach out to you, maybe 6 months from when you applied, but it will definitely happen.
So we have a question from Ignacio, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Hi, Diego. What do you think is a good advice for someone who wants to start developing this area of translation, like small video games or so?
Mm, okay, I'm not sure. It means to start as a translator.
Yeah,
I think
maybe
it's
I think yeah, maybe to start out as a video game translator. I don't know if small video games you have more of a chance of translating them because they are not so popular or worldwide. I don't know. That's just something I'm thinking about.
Yes. Well, game localization agencies, they depending on the size of the game localization agency, they will have different levels of different sizes of games. So they might be localizing AAA games, like the big ones, and they will also have mobile games. So once you, if when you start working with a game localization agency, they will probably, if you have no experience, they will probably assign you some smaller games that are not too complex, and that's when you really start working. But also smaller localization agencies, they will hardly have those kind of clients. So small video games is probably where you start. That's how I started. My first few games were mobile games that were not really complex.
Mhm. We have a question from Joseph. I don't know if you'll know the answer, but I'll share it so maybe someone else can also chime in and answer Joseph. Hello, Diego. I'd like to know if we have game localization tasks in Kiswahili, which is one of the main languages that are widely spoken in Africa. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I can't really tell if that's how the market is for that language pair in particular. I have limited knowledge on that.
Mhm. I really hope someone can just help Joseph, and we will get to an answer to his question.
Yeah,
But
you
we
can
have
reach. I'm sorry, Robert. You can, Joseph. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Feel free, and we'll figure that out.
We have another very important question from Florin, which is question: can AI translation bot help you in the process of translation, like Chat GPT 3.5 or 4, especially in I think video game localization? Is it a trend or not?
Well, I'm sure there are a lot of video games out there, video game developers that have been working with AI translation, even on the front end side. That is the text on screen that the players is playing. But as a translator, I'm definitely ChatGPT is definitely a help to me. It helps me a lot with ideation. It helps me a lot to point towards to help me with my research. But that's not where I would go to find my definite translation for something. But it's great. It's a great brainstorming tool. It's great to help you with your research. And I encourage using ChatGPT for any translation out there.
And another question from Paulo. Hi, I'm a subtitler thinking in branching out to game localization. I feel the software may be quite different between those branches of ABT. Which software would you suggest I invest in learning for game localization?
Well, game localization. I actually speak about cat tools in general on my upcoming webinar. But I think the tool of preference for video game localizers, and for me in particular, is MemoQ. MemoQ is a great tool. Great tool that has a lot of features. You can perform quality checks. The preview panel is really good. I think it's definitely a step ahead for many of other cat tools out there. But the job market, I mean, the game localization markets in general, not always they use MemoQ because it requires a license from the freelancers as well. So many will actually use an online platform like Phrase or Crowding. The good news is that cat tools in general are very similar to one another. So if you are proficient with one, you will of course you will have to adjust to a new cat tool, but it won't be you won't need to learn from scratch. You can just search some documentation to find out how to perform something that you knew how to do on your cat tool of choice. So I think if you want to choose a software to begin with, that would probably MemoQ or crowding. I see crowding has been used a lot on video game localization in the past 2 years in particular.
Mhm. And again, on tools, Coralia asks, what tools do you suggest for building a portfolio?
Well, for building a website portfolio, you won't need a CAD tool to do that. You can do that just with your regular text editing software. And if you're asking about how to develop the website, then probably WordPress would be a good choice. But I'm not really an expert on the different platforms that can be used to build a website.
If I can suggest one, maybe Canva. Canva is really easy to use. Maybe that's just the place that you could go for a nice portfolio.
Yeah, I've been using
Um,
it a lot on the workshop to prepare for the workshop.
nice. So we have other questions. We have one from Alice. Thank you, Diego, for your previous answer. I have another question. If I wanted to do an internship in localization, should I ask video game localization companies or video game publishers too?
Well, I haven't found much internships in localization. They usually jobs are usually an entry level, like junior, and I can't actually recall if I have seen an internship for game localization, but I think it probably would be best looking for video game localization agencies than video game publishers, because video game publishers, like I said, it's not very common that that I'm sorry, that video game developers have a dedicated localization team, because it's not usually cost effective unless it's a big publisher or a big developer with a lot of content that needs to be constantly localized. And those companies that actually have a full-time team, they will tend to choose someone with more experience. So I think the your best bet would be to go for a video game localization agency if you are starting out.
And again on portfolios, what material do you suggest to include in a portfolio regarding copyright?
Well, I think you could go for I don't know. You could, if you have a favorite game, or a game that you think is particularly challenging, you can work with that. I wouldn't be too concerned with copyright, because you are not profiting from the sample translation you were doing. You are just using content that's publicly available, and you are providing a suggestion of localization. So as long as you don't monetize your sample translation in any way, it should be fine.
Mhm. Another question from Abraham. Diego, really insightful interview. Do you prefer to work with indie video game developers or with big companies?
Indie video game developers.
You didn't even think about that.
Absolutely. I mean, working with big companies is great for your portfolio, for your CV. That's what working with those kind of games. That's what really helped me get where I am. But it can be really stressful, and sometimes you can be very distant from the creative part of things. When you work with video game developers, for example, with just like I'm doing right now with Kenshi 2, which is an indie game developer. I think they are much more passionate about what they're doing, and they are very interested that their work translates well into another language. So that kind of proximity you build, that kind of relationship you build within the indie game developers is hard to be seen in bigger companies. So I think it has been more enjoyable for me. But there are a lot of colleagues I personally know that they prefer working with big companies, because it's true that there are a lot of positive aspects with working with those companies as well.
And again, we have a tricky question, or kind of hard one. What about landing video game clients as a translation agency slash team? I tend to have success landing clients as a freelancer, but I don't really know who to contact and how to contact game devs.
Yeah, well, that's really the trickiest part. I'm still getting around with that personally, to be perfectly honest, because video game localization agencies or teams, they tend to be more aggressive in their marketing. They attend events, game events, so they have dedicated sales team to do that work. And as a freelancer, your time and your attention will be divided between actually translating and marketing yourself, approaching translation agency. I'm sorry, approaching game developers, and you will also, of course, be competing with those game localization agencies. So it's tough, but it can be done. And also another thing that can be difficult for a freelancer translating with game developers is that translation agencies, they are able to offer a one package with multiple languages. If you are a freelancer, you probably be working with only one pair. So that's also an attractive thing for developers to hire a translation agency. But it can be done. You will need to build a very strong portfolio. You'll need to attend some events, and then you will need to just start maybe code selling to those game developers, and be very aware of which games are coming out, and trying to find ways to approach those game developers.
We have another question from Abraham that asks, could you share your thoughts on the effectiveness of using a platform like Discord to acquire new clients in the video game industry?
Well, I don't personally use Discord, but I know some people that do. And Discord is good because Discord is widely used by game developers, right? So especially those that are in the first stages of the development. So that can be a good way if you are able to find those communities. Yeah, that can be a good way if you join their Discord and try to get in contact with the developers and their operations team to see if you can acquire new clients in that manner.
And we have another question from Rafael. From your personal experience, have you received negative feedbacks on a game you've put time and effort on? If yes, how have you dealt with that?
Well, yes, I think negative feedback is just something that's inevitable because we are all taking risks, and we are when we're talking about games, there are people from all kinds of backgrounds. So sometimes you are just confident that the solution you come up with will sound, that people will enjoy that solution. Sometimes they don't, especially when you are localizing proper nouns. There are a lot of people that just don't like having proper nouns localized. They prefer to have the original proper noun, for example, in English, and they sometimes the translation is just not well accepted, and you have to deal with that. So the way I deal with that is I try to understand when I'm localizing a game. I try to understand the target game audience and what are their preferences, and see if I can learn something from the negative feedback I received. So I have some proper nouns that I come up with that I thought were great, but they actually turns out they weren't that great. It happens. It's just part of the job. But then I try to take the lesson from that, which is okay. They don't like that I will get so much liberty translating proper noun. So the next time, if the proper noun is if the localization of the proper noun is too different from the original proper noun, then I'll probably just stick with the English, even if I think that it would be better if the proper noun was localized. So that's just one of the examples I have here.
And we have two last questions. If the audience has some more, just please share them right now, so then we can wrap up and don't steal too much of Diego's time. We have a question from Gabriel Perez, which has the same surname as you, and it's funny. I really think it's funny. Maybe you're, I don't know, related, and we don't know that. And
He's
he
my
asks,
brother.
hi Diego, how is the game localization market for language pairs without English?
That's a very good question, my brother.
My brother.
Well, to be perfectly honest, what game developers tend to do when the game developers is from a country whose native language is not English is that the source language is, that's actually something that I discuss in the game localization course. That so, for example, if the game is it was developed in Russia, or for example Poland, let's take the example from The Witcher 3. That's just such a big name. What usually happens is that Poland will get localized into English, and from English the localization will be done into all other languages. So that's what they usually do. They prefer to invest in a great localization into English, and then have that localization spread to the other languages. And also because it's also more cost effective, because it would be much more expensive to find, for example, a Portuguese translator translating from Polish into Portuguese than from English into Portuguese. So that's what usually happens. And some developers, for example, in Brazil, that happens a lot. They develop their games in English as their first choice, and then they localize to Portuguese. I find this really crazy, but it happens a lot, especially in South America.
We have another question related to language pairs, which is from Ricardo. How do you see the localization industry for games that need to be translated into Brazilian Portuguese?
Well, I would say Brazilian Portuguese is one of the biggest markets for localization right now. I think it's one of the top choices developers go with, because the game market is just so huge, so huge. I don't have the hard numbers to prove that, but there are just millions and millions of users. And also they tend to use the Brazilian Portuguese translation for other European Portuguese markets too. So I would say the market is really good for Brazilian Portuguese right now.
Another question from Abraham. Which video game genres do you feel most confident translating, and what are some of your favorite video games to play?
Thank you for your question, Abraham. Well, video game genres, I feel most confident translating strategy games and role-playing games, because those are my favorite genres. Those are the genres I grew up playing. So I really know my way around localizing those games, and I feel really confident about them. And what I really enjoy about role-playing games is exactly that. Different characters have different ways of speaking, and that is what I find most fascinating about language in general, is that thing that how people from different regions in the same country can have so many different ways of speaking. And when I have the opportunity to use that, usually in a role-playing game, that's when I feel really accomplished. So and for the second questions, what are some of your favorite video games to play? Hmm. Well, right now, I don't, this is a difficult question.
You need to take sides,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
sounded,
you need
it
to make a
sounded,
choice.
yeah, it sounded easy, but now that I'm thinking of it, well, usually strategy games. I enjoy strategy games a lot. I was playing at the beginning of the year. I got addicted to Crusader Kings 3 because I just enjoy that kind of nerdy stuff. So the games like that really are really what gets me interested.
Okay, so one last question from Alva. This is a technical slash marketing one. Are there proven steps to contact the gaming agencies? I mean, the best method, such as email or a call.
Well, game localization agencies usually have a career page or job page or contact page where they advertise that they are looking for freelancers. This is very common in game localization agencies because, like I said, the market can be very dynamic. So a freelance translator that they were relying on for a lot of time suddenly stops accepting work for a number of reasons, and they have to find another. So game localization agencies have these career pages, and usually there is a form that is embedded in their website, or maybe they would just provide the email for contact, and then you will get in contact with them with a cover letter and your CV.
We actually have two more questions. Can I share
Okay.
them?
Okay, good.
So we have one from Gustavo. Do developers provide glossaries or translation memories to help out the translation process?
It really depends on the developer. Some developers will provide only an Excel file, and you have to to do what you have to do to put that into a CAT tool. Others will have localization. Will have localization processes in pages in place, and especially if they have already worked with, if they have already localized previous games, they probably have translation memories so that you can keep consistent with. So it really depends a lot on the developer. And some developers will have their own glossaries. Other developers will pay the translation agency to build a glossary for them. So it can be both ways. There's really no standard.
Very last question. Here's a silly question. I don't like playing games, but I love translating them. My final paper was about localization and Russian gamer language. Is this an obstacle?
Well, that's funny, but well, I think I think maybe it will be an obstacle up to a point because, like I said, you really have to be immersed on the language to localize properly, so that players can be familiar with the kind of localization you are doing. But you really don't have to be let's say a gamer or addicted to game in order to be a good localization, but you will of course need to download games and play some of them to and pay attention to their language. So, like I said, you won't need to spend, I don't know, 3 4 hours a day like a gamer would, but you will need from time to time. You'll need to play some games and see how the language works in them.
Mhm. So the very last questions comes from me and is what will your students learn in your upcoming expert course in video game translation, and what makes it so special?
Okay. Well, my upcoming course offers a comprehensive look at the video game localization agent industry. So students will learn how to start searching for freelance jobs, which tools are most common, the best practices. They will also learn about project life cycle, which job roles are involved, and to which they could apply, and how much they can earn as a freelance translator, and how game localization testing is carried out, and much more. So, of course, uh, in order to offer that much content in a 5 hour course, it is fast paced. So there's a lot of content in only 5 hours, but students will have a very good grasp on the localization industry as a whole. Because I remember when I started out, the video game localization industry felt like a real mystery to me. So things were just translators were all kept in the dark. It really was so mysterious to me. So what is most special about this course, I would say, is that I built the course, I wish that was around 8 years ago. So students will learn from the beginning of their career, like finding freelance jobs, developing skills, and where they want to go next. So this is a complete journey, let's say it, in 5 hours. So I think there are not many courses in video game localization around like that.
Okay, so thank you so much, Diego, for your time and your precious advice.
Thank you, Roberta. It was really nice talking with you and answering everyone's questions. I hope everyone enjoyed.
Okay, so and thanks to our audience. If you want to keep on learning about video game translation with Diego, check out his upcoming course. You will find the link in the chat. And if you like this free interview, please consider offering us a cup of coffee using the link I've just sent in the chat. And thanks everyone, and have a very nice evening. See you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.